Hi everybody. By the time you see this, I will have released the grades for the research article number 5, which was about the study of a web-based intervention to increase physical activity. I wanted to just do a quick video to explain a couple of things about that quiz that seem to trip up a bunch of students. Some of the questions on there, and they're important concepts, so I want you to have a handle on them as we move forward. These issues will continue to come up. So one of the things that people lost some credit on that quiz for was the distinction, the explanation of what the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis was. Most people got the idea that the intervention was meant to increase physical activity, but you have to be careful when you state the null and directional hypotheses. Be careful in stating them as a relationship between two groups. So the alternative hypothesis is that one group will be higher or lower than the other group, and that's how you should state that alternative hypothesis. In parallel fashion, the null hypothesis is that the two groups will be equal. Right? So it's a point of being technically correct about that and being sure when you state the null and alternative hypothesis that you state it in terms of the relationship between the two groups under study, or three groups, depending on what the experiment was. The study we read for this week had two groups, so you have to describe the null and the alternative in terms of the relationship between them. One will be higher than the other, or they'll be the same. The second question that tripped people up, actually two questions, was identifying the independent and the dependent variable, or the primary independent variable in this case. This was an experimental study. The primary independent variable, or as I always try to mention when I write about it, the presumed cause under study, was the treatment. The specific theory-based intervention that employed SCT constructs is the independent variable, whether they get that or not. And independent variables can be measured or manipulated by the experimenter. In this case, it was manipulated. We used random assignment, and we'll get to some of these constructs as we move forward. Random assignment the experimenter used to apply the treatment, to manipulate that treatment. Some got it, some didn't. It is the primary independent variable in this study. The DV, in contrast, or the dependent variables, in contrast, are the outcomes, or the presumed effects. So the outcomes in this study were physical activity levels, time spent, moderate and vigorous physical activity, and social cognitive theory variables. So self-efficacy, self-regulation, ability to set goals and make plans, those sorts of things. So be sure to keep those IVs and DVs straight. IVs are the presumed causes. They are either measured or manipulated by the experimenter. The DVs are always measured, and they are the outcomes. Likewise, the causal relationship, or similarly, the causal relationship under study in this experiment was the causal relationship between the theory-based intervention and physical activity levels. What is the effect of the intervention, the presumed cause, on the outcome or the effect, the levels of physical activity. Last question that didn't trip people up a lot is they were making a distinction between what really a delimitation is per se versus what we'll get into in terms of inclusion and exclusion criteria. A delimitation is about a choice that the researcher makes that makes the study more practical or doable. That is a conscious choice, in the planning of the study that makes it more feasible. So things like, the convenience of that study population at that university is a delimitation of that study. A lot of people mentioned things like BMI greater than 40, pregnant, medical conditions. Those are not delimitations per se. They're inclusion or exclusion criteria depending on how you talk about them. The main idea there is those things were done not to make the study more practical or feasible or set the boundaries for the study, but done to protect patient safety. We don't want people who have heart disease participating in a study of physical activity when we don't have access to medical staff to intervene should something happen. So, there's a difference there, and they both limit to a certain extent the generalizability of the study, but they're done for different reasons. Some for patient safety, others are true in the sense of what a real delimitation is. It's something that makes the study more feasible, sets the boundaries for the study. Conscious decisions on a more global level, you might say. All right, those are the main things that caused a little bit of grief on that quiz. But we're going to get these questions, some of them over and over again as we move through the semester. But hopefully that cleared some of the reasons up for the loss of points that you may have received on that quiz. All right. Thanks. Bye.